Hi, I'm Joni with Looking at Careers with Joni, and I'm here today with Jeff Beaver. Jeff's a serial entrepreneur, and he has information on everything, and I think that we're going to find he's really interesting to talk to. So, Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I had a good morning so far, and got to talk to my brother. I don't get to see him very often, so I enjoy it.
Great,
I enjoy that.
great. We could talk about what you're doing today,
Mhm.
but let's talk about how you got to where you are today.
Okay.
So, and then that'll bring us in. We could spend some time on what you're doing and how people can find you.
Okay.
It all started in the service, right?
Yes. At 17, I joined the service. But before I did, I kind of had this mindset that I needed to learn a lot of different things before I even went in the service. When I was in high school, I took a lot of electronics classes. I took drafting classes. It's like
Oh,
basically building skills in high school. I had a really good high school where it was very vocation oriented.
mm-hmm.
And so I got to learn a lot of different things. I was in junior achievement in high school and just things that were really like driven to instill in me this sort of sense of entrepreneurship, I guess.
I was going to
Uh,
say you've always been an entrepreneur then.
Absolutely. We had a class that was focused on making license plates, customized license plates in the shop class that I was in. It wasn't just a regular shop class. It was always this, way to figure out how to make money kind of thing.
Right.
So
Wow.
I went in the service at 17, um, and I was military intelligence and 82nd Airborne,
Mm-hmm.
and I was I excelled pretty well through the ranks. I got to be sergeant, and I was honorable discharge after the Gulf War.
Wow.
And I decided to go to college, because before I had gone, I really didn't know that college was something that I would be able to do because I didn't have a whole lot of money to look at that, and my grades weren't good because I was a shop kid.
Sure.
So uh,
Yeah.
I was focused on the fun things and not the things that I should have been doing, which is math.
Well, yeah. Not as important. That's okay.
After I got out of the service, I went to college. After I moved to California and
Mm-hmm.
worked a little bit, and then I kind of preparing to go to college, because I went right in the service, and then I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do after getting out.
Right.
And I focused on history of all things because I just really wanted to understand, people
Mm-hmm.
and the world, not U.S. history because it's always focused on war.
Right.
So I really wanted to understand
Oh,
cultures
interesting.
and people and society.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then after I graduated high school, or college, sorry,
Right.
after I graduated college, I went to Little Rock and I was working as a salesperson
Mm-hmm.
because I had a child. Our daughter, I had gotten married, and our daughter was born in my junior year of undergraduate. And so I started working, and we're like, we got to go to graduate school because I really wanted to teach because at the time I was like, I wanted to be able to, we had been doing work with these youth programs, and really was able to connect with them because my wife and I are your atypical people. We're like, kind of alternative. We were both punks,
Uh-huh.
and goth kids, and people just really gravitated to us, especially younger people,
Right.
because they understood that we weren't judging them for the way that they looked or whatever it was.
Sure.
Uh, and wound up deciding to go to graduate school because we wanted to teach at the college level. Um, and we had talked about education when we were in undergraduate school, and we were told that we wouldn't fit in and we wouldn't do
Oh,
well in it.
interesting.
Uh,
Wow.
they said, we recommend you don't do this because you're not going to make it through it because you're different. And this is probably in the 90s. We're
Oh,
like,
that's something. I've never heard of that before.
I know. It was a small town. It was a dry county,
Uh-huh.
South Arkansas.
Okay.
Um, anyway, we decided to go to college and get our advanced degrees so that we could teach at a university, because
Mhm.
at the university level, you really get away from the parents as influences on the
Sure.
education system, because
Right.
they're not having an influence on what your content is or whatever.
Hmm.
So we wound up completing MFA degrees at the university. It took a little bit just because we were both in graduate school with a child.
It's
Um,
interesting you both chose the same path.
well, what's interesting is that I enrolled in Middle Eastern Studies program at the
Okay.
university.
Uh-huh.
And then I went to a production. My wife was a theater person. She was a
Okay.
theater person. And I went to a production, and really, when I was an undergrad, one of my work study jobs was doing stagecraft, like building
Hmm.
sets for the plays. And then I got introduced to lighting there at my undergraduate.
Hmm.
And I realized how interesting it was, because I had done electrical and electronics and stuff like that before. And I
Uh-huh.
had dealt with electronics when I was in the Army, because, you know, I was a ground surveillance systems operator. So my whole life has been kind of around electronics and things like that.
Okay.
Um, and so this professor said, my lighting person is leaving. Would you like to do it? And I started doing it as a work study job. I was like, yes,
Oh.
I would love it. And then I started designing classes, and I became a theater minor.
Wow.
So when I went to graduate school, I went and saw a production, and I was like, I really hate not doing that,
Yeah.
because I really enjoyed theater,
Hmm.
because it's very much a living art form, and you're interpreting an experience that someone else had in life.
Hmm.
And so it was like this, for me as a historian, it was like this way of conveying something about the people that lived it,
Right.
lived that experience, whether it was
Hmm.
death of a salesman, whatever
Sure.
the dramatic piece was. So it was this kind
Right.
of living art form. So I decided to switch paths in graduate school,
Uh-huh.
because they were starting an MFA program, and they offered me a full assistantship.
Oh,
and
nice. Hmm.
and I was like, because they had seen one of my productions and I had won an award for it, and they were
Oh,
like,
nice.
we really want you to come over here and be part of this program. And I was like, okay. So
Wow.
I wound up at one point, it became very difficult to try to have a family and go to school. So there was about a
Sure.
year where we left the program. And when I did, I went and took a position at the Walton Art Center as their master electrician, which is it's a multi-million-dollar performing art center here in
Oh,
Northwest Arkansas.
nice. Okay.
And that was great for a while. However, it's not enough to sustain families. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Sure.
you're at the time is 99, so I think the labor was like $7 or something like that an
Oh,
hour.
yeah.
Because
Not
this is a
enough to live on.
non-union state. It's a non-union
Right.
state,
Okay.
right to work state. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
so I went to work for an engineering firm at the end of the season, and they taught me how to be an electrical designer. They started teaching me how to do layouts, because they were remodeling this is the center for Walmart stores in
Okay.
Northwest Arkansas. So this one firm was hiring for lighting designers, and I was like, well, I know lighting, I could
Wow.
probably learn this. And so I went in, they put me in this training program, and I learned to do all the remodels for the stores and and at the time it wasn't mandatory to learn these other things, but I'm the type of person that I want to learn something that makes me a better at whatever it is that I'm doing.
Right.
When I was in graduate school, no one was CADing, using computer aided drafting. So
Okay.
I started learning. I was like, this would be much faster as a lighting designer if I knew how to do CAD. And so I started
Mhm.
like getting on the internet, and 'cause I was like, I'm going to figure out how to do this. So I started like,
How did you even know about CADing though?
uh, I had done drafting
Okay.
in high school, but it was like hand drafting.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew how to hand draft.
Okay.
And when I was, uh, I learned about CAD through some publications that were
Okay.
theater related, that were technical theater related.
I get it. Mm-hmm.
So when I went, and that we had two architecture students who were in the MFA program as scene designers,
Mm-hmm.
because they, you know, people specialize in architecture, and when they design a theater space, it's very easy for an architect to design a facility that doesn't take the production into mind.
Okay.
They're good at designing a building,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to all the details that are involved in the building design and what's going to be needed for how the pipe and drapes coming in, and where the lighting wiring goes, and where the dimmer system, and how easy is it to load in and load out equipment, stuff like that,
Right. Yeah.
that aren't taught in architecture school. They're taught about structural loads and arrangements and building flow and stuff like that, but not about theater, because you can most of them design for the audience and not the technicians, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that
Which
makes
is a whole
sense.
different ball game. And I learned that in actually a class on theater planning that I took. That was it looked at this theater that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it was just the worst theater to perform in, just because of all the limitations that
Oh.
existed. And
Uh-huh.
so I learned about CAD while I was, going through the technical program.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was at the engineering firm, they had these classes, like self-improvement classes that you could do. And I was like, I want to learn AutoCAD.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
they were like,
Nice.
okay. So um, I went through it on my own, because it was like a, self-guided
Mm-hmm.
tutorial, like a series of videos. And
Mm-hmm.
I just did it. So I stayed there for about a year, and I was really close to finishing my MFA. And I was like, this is sitting at this desk doing this. This is great as a career to just sit at this desk, but I need to be doing something that's more like artistic expression
Okay.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I went and went back to school and finished my MFA.
Mm-hmm.
And after I graduated, of all things, we took a position, my wife and I both did, in a small town in Arkansas, starting a theater program. We had
Oh.
120 students. And just like they told us, we did not fit in. Because my wife and I, we're not for everyone. There are
Yeah.
people that, we see things as pushing envelopes, and wanting people to understand the depth of the art that they're doing.
Right.
And so I brought in dance troupes from LA, because I was in
Uh-huh.
charge of all the programming and everything, like
Uh-huh.
to do with the theater, and she was in charge of the curriculum in the class,
Okay.
because they built this $10 million performing arts center in this small town to do music.
Wow.
And so I learned a lot in that process about how to set up software for ticketing. And, it was great for me, because I constantly learning something, which
And you're
is what
flexible enough to do that.
I really enjoyed it. But there were a lot of things just going on in the school district that it was a real small town, and it just didn't fit.
Yeah.
So we did not renew our contracts and moved back to Northwest Arkansas, because it was down in the River Valley.
Okay.
And we moved back here, and I started, at the time I was like, okay, I just have to get away from theater for a while. I need to do something that focuses on me, that allows me to just recuperate and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to teach at the high school level. I just don't.
Right. Yeah.
And at the time, trying to find professorships has never been easy,
Sure.
and to try to find one where we both could teach was even more problematic. We applied to a lot of different places, but in order to sustain ourselves, one of the things I was like, what do I know how to do? And my dad was a carpenter, and I had
Okay.
done woodworking. And at one point when I was working at the Walton Art Center, I had been doing a play. I was designing set and lights for cabaret,
Mm-hmm.
production of cabaret, and there was a man that had his wood shop next door in this old building,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just the coolest person I'd ever met. Still my friend to this day. But
Uh-huh.
I was like, he had a wood shop, and you know what? Low pressure.
Right.
Low pressure. I know how to use a lathe. I know how to use a joiner and a table saw and all of these things, and I can learn something from it. He was a woodworker.
Right.
So this is 2002, 2002, and strangely enough, he wasn't making just boxes. He was building a massive mahogany bar. It was just the most
Oh.
beautiful, elegant thing I had ever seen in my life. And we
Uh-huh.
worked on that one bar for about 6 months,
Wow.
just two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it went into a high-end home because we have a lot of high-end homes around here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pre-housing crisis.
Okay.
So these are McMansions, we called them at the time.
Sure. But
So
so in 6 months with one piece,
uh-huh.
can two people make enough money to support families?
Oh yes, that bar.
Uh,
Luckily enough, okay, so that guy, he was working for a home theater designer,
okay.
and this was part of a home theater that was going into a large home, and the designer was very good, had a really good eye for design, had a great way of interacting,
Mm-hmm.
and this was not a cheap bar. The bar itself billed out at $75,000.
Wow.
It had a coffered ceiling. It was all these inlays and
Wow.
brass and stained glass and backlit stuff and pop out cabinets. It was not a simple thing.
Yeah.
So most of her projects, I was making pretty good money. I was making pretty good money because, again, I'm just a laborer at this point. I'm not
Sure.
the primary woodworker.
I get it. Okay.
And I wound up working for her from 2002 until 2008, on and off.
Uh-huh.
Just because she would have a project going on, and then she would need you, and because she didn't actually employ me, but I became a subcontractor for her.
Okay.
And my dad was a carpenter, so I
Mm-hmm.
knew how to do things that were like, how to build a cabinet, how to put, drawer glides in and stuff
Sure.
like that. Which not everybody does.
Right. I know. I wish you lived closer.
I learned a lot of skill sets while I was doing it, though, things that I didn't know about, like projection and DPI for projectors and things like that, because
Mm-hmm.
she did smart systems that were
Okay.
part of the home. And the more she got to Craig didn't like to go, the woodworker didn't like to go on the job. So he would
Uh-huh.
always send me to go do the installs,
Ah.
so he could stay in his shop and just do his thing,
Mm-hmm.
because he was great at that, but he just didn't want to have to interface with clients because they were like not his type of people. And
Right.
I'm very good at like being social.
Right.
So he would send me out to the jobs, and as I did, she got to know more about me and recognized my capabilities on the lighting end, because
Okay.
with a home theater, it's tied in to lighting controls and dimming the lights in the room, and it was very automated. So
Uh-huh.
I started learning about the control systems that went into the smart home
Okay.
through working with her.
Uh-huh.
And I worked with her doing that until 2006. And an interesting thing happened. We were working on a home
Mm-hmm.
for uh, a high-end art collector of an antique
Okay.
American art collection.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they wanted to do was to protect the art from fading.
Okay.
And when you deal with light, it emits UV, and so you put lens covers over it. That's one option, is to put filters over it. But
Right.
that's something that has to be kept up. And interestingly enough, she knew a person who was a lighting designer in LA
Mm-hmm.
and had been friends with him for a while. Just when I say lighting designer, it's meant for homes and buildings and things like that. Not
Okay.
like I had been doing for theater,
Sure.
just totally different.
Right.
Um, and so he sent a box that had this light in it, and it was these little LEDs.
Uh-huh.
And we were like, wait a minute, this doesn't produce UV. This is perfect for that job. And she and I both started doing research and found all of these. Went back, because I'm an electronics person. I was like, it's this LED. It's this LED that's the one that makes it, because it's different than just uh, before. LEDs were illumination to be seen,
Yeah.
like we had in our
Sure.
remote, that you
Right.
see it and then it illuminates, but not enough to illuminate,
Right. I
right?
get it.
To
Yeah.
light
Can't
anything.
light a room. Yeah.
But this was a different type of chip because it was now emitting light as opposed to just being a source of illumination,
Mm-hmm.
point source. So we found out the chip and then went to North Carolina and met with Cree, which was the original manufacturer, and
Sure.
then discovered that some of the Cree people had gone over and made another company. Long story short, we started setting up relationships with all the people that Cree was selling the LEDs to. And then
Oh.
started a representation firm that was looking at being representatives for each of those different companies. When it was Beta and Journey, it was all these really high-end LED companies,
Mm-hmm.
and met with them, and then started using our sales to
Yeah.
go and find projects where people were wanting to do something that was innovative.
Uh-huh.
And that's how, at the time, we did the first LED McDonald's, and we did the first LED Taco Bell, KFC combination store, and
Wow.
we did a green technology center in the city for the city of Chicago, for their green technology center.
Mm-hmm.
No one was really doing it at the time.
Right.
Um, so then, about 2008, we had set up sub reps and we were doing all of the sales process. I discovered an article that was about one particular type of chip that was very unique. And I was looking through the magazine, and I just found it really interesting. And I talked to her about it, and I was like, she just had no interest in doing anything development wise. And
Right.
my development history. It was like,
Right.
I one day I was at a Starbucks, and a friend of mine who was a parent of a girl that went to school with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, her husband had worked at Walmart and went to China, and that last I knew they were living in China.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there she was. I was like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing here?" And she said, "Oh, we moved back." And she's like, "You should really talk to my husband because he's looking to start a company doing lighting." And I was like, "What?"
Wow. Wow.
Now, when we finally sat down um, to talk, I got an idea about what he was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And his was a little bit more like, uh, at the time, it was like reclaim all these old Christmas lights, because he had been
Okay.
involved in all of this lighting stuff for Walmart in China.
Okay.
It was the 100 million CFL campaign that they
Mm-hmm.
were trying to do. And then he wanted to do this Christmas light reclamation program with cities to go and get, it's very unique.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really want to do this other thing, like I knew in my head. And the more I talked to him, he recognized my technical background.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said to me was really interesting, because at the time, people are looking at people who had fine arts degrees because they think outside the box of
Mm.
design. So
Right.
he was like, I really think I didn't know whether or not I could be a vice president of research and development,
Right.
which it
Right.
was, I was like, that may be way over my head, but sure, I'm glad, I'll be glad to give it a try.
Yeah.
The more we
Wow.
talked about it, and I wound up going on board and become a partner in the startup. And we wound up developing the first LED bulb for the market, essentially.
Wow.
That was a dimmable bulb. There were non-dims at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but this was the first dimmable bulb.
Wow.
Everything else was a fixture,
Yeah.
and we filed a patent on it.
Uh-huh.
And it was me and an engineer. I had an engineer involved in it because you want to make sure they're doing everything right.
Sure.
Um, so anyway, we started this company, and from 2008 until 2014, I was the vice president of research and development for that company, traveling all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
uh, learning a lot of things, because from the discussion about poultry lights, that
Right.
was starting to look at this technology and how it could be applied in different areas, and what's the added benefit. That was something
Right.
that we learned about the sales process, is figure out what works for the customer and design something that they can use that has added value other than energy. Because
Right.
energy's, if it's just about energy, they can go get a CFL. This
Right.
is a higher value. You have to add value to that.
Sure.
And then in 2014, I left the company. We had partners that started leaving, and it became harder to fund the projects because they kept getting bigger, and banks weren't lending. They
Right.
won't lend you for components, because
Right.
if they're out, they're just stuck with a bunch of components.
Right.
So it was very hard,
Sure.
because that was 2014. Things are not good.
Right.
The bigger players are getting in the market, and
Right.
regardless of how good you are, all it takes is a GE to throw $250 million at a sector, and suddenly you're not competitive.
Sure. You could
Or
never do the same thing.
you
Yeah.
can never do it the same. You can struggle like a Musk, but he even, it took a long time for him
Yeah.
to
Right.
break through,
Sure.
getting a NASA contract.
Right.
That saved him from bankruptcy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in 2014, I decided, I saw that the value of LED and the cost of it kept coming down, and you were never going to be able to get to the point where you were going to be able to compete with an import item,
Mm-hmm.
and let somebody else manage all the issues. And
Right.
then I had started doing independent lighting consulting and helping people in the market source quality product, because I knew what to look for, rather than them having to rely on a catalog and not knowing what was good
Sure.
and what wasn't. And
Right.
I had enough metrics in my head about what was good, and who were the suppliers, and what components went inside, and the right questions to ask. So
Mm-hmm.
I became a lighting consultant.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then I started doing it like working with parking lots and converting parking lots and doing large conversions.
Right.
Really like having an impact on some of the energy that was being consumed, because there's a lot out there that's being wasted.
Sure.
And helping people navigate the rebate programs, because that's another aspect of it that people just don't know how to get the money from the utility companies or from the city, whatever it is. And I knew how to do that, so I started helping them do that. And in 2016, there was an election, and the emphasis on energy efficiency went away.
Right.
And the CO2 caps that the energy companies were having to do went away.
Right.
All the energy reductions, became less about energy efficiency and energy demand reduction and greenhouse gas reduction, all of things that impacted the emphasis on efficiency.
Right.
So in 2016, things really went south. And I just couldn't keep enough projects going and wound up just losing everything. Pretty
Right.
much.
Yeah.
That was a very difficult year, and
It's
wound
hard
up
to
going
believe how politics can really have that big of a influence on what we're doing, huh?
on an entire industry.
Right.
Because you look at, you're balancing one thing, and I recognize that even from my sector, is that what I was doing as a new technology kind of pioneer is you're offsetting somebody else losing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yep.
someone else. You're a disruptive technology, and no matter what it is that you're introducing, if it's disruptive, the other side of it is going to push back against it. So
That's true.
you have to hear their side of it and say, well, look at the coal mines.
Right.
As we move toward energy independence, you've got whole cities that are just becoming empty because no one can live there.
Right.
All coal mine related.
I know. I understand.
So I recognize that. I recognize that, and I tried to build some of that into my product design when I was doing it, so that the electricians who did service calls didn't lose out on it, because they still had to come back and replace the bars that were in the lights or whatever. So
Yeah.
I recognized it even then, but to realize that a political shift can change an entire dynamic of a whole bunch of different industries, not just the renewable sector.
Right.
I wasn't the only one out there being a consultant. I wasn't the only one out there helping people navigate those things that they were having to do, energy demand reduction.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. Wow.
But it went away in 2016, and I went back to teaching, doing substitute teaching, and did that. Did a couple of other jobs, like driving for, food delivery service, and then basically did that for a while. And then in 2018, I think so, went to teach. My wife and I, she used to teach at a facility for adults with disabilities. And she created a dance program and taught Shakespeare to clients. And I was her volunteer lighting person. So in 2018, I want to say, we went back to the organization as evening activities directors. So we were teaching, how to cook, and then just providing activities for the clients to have something at night to do. Because some live in the facility and some are all serviced, and they come in, and we would go to ball games or things like that. It was a great experience. I love that organization to death. But the just keeping up with a lot of people becomes pretty stressful.
Sure.
So uh, I had a friend of mine who said, you know how to do all this stuff, but you should just say you can fix it. you know,
Right. Yeah,
and
that's
so
true.
you know how to put a doorknob on, and people don't know how to fix things.
It's
You know,
true.
they just don't. And so I started doing, just as a part-time thing, was I'm going to go put this door, hang this door, where I would go and do a handyman project here and there.
Right.
And I've been doing that on and off. I still do it from time to time, but now I'm sort of semi-retired.
Uh-huh.
Um, but even semi-retired, somebody that's as kind of always thinking, uh,
Right. I get it.
uh, our daughter, in the midst of the pandemic, was living in Boulder, and she
Hmm.
had a lot of like stuff going on with her car, and she was having to change jobs and kept having to put money in the car, and she finally totaled it and moved home uh, after much anguish, because she had been living all over. She lived in Boston, and she was living in Denver, and then she lived in Boulder, and she was doing a lot. She was a manager of a cleaning service up there.
Oh, wow.
um, and she moved home, and she had applied to the university um, as a administrative assistant.
Hmm.
And as soon as she got it, she had always been doing crafts, which is like crocheting.
Right.
And for 6 years, she's been doing it, and just was not getting the momentum. And she would put them online, and it just didn't move.
Hmm.
So, and my wife and I are both, even when I was doing the lighting company, I was their social media person. It was
Yeah.
something that I knew about, was social media. And so whether it was, I've gone through the whole transition from, MySpace all the way through. I've kept up with what the technology was, and having a social media presence is
Right.
very important. And
Hmm.
for the lighting company, it was very important. I was always the person that was going out and getting photos and making sure that we had a presence on YouTube and showing people how to do it, and educating awareness.
Hmm.
It's a way to create awareness, and we
Right.
had used that to our advantage at the time, because no one really saw Twitter as a platform. And
Sure.
this was early 2000s. It was it or late 2000s.
Hmm.
It was growing, but it was really a way to disrupt and use that disruption, because you could have a message directly to the consumer.
Right.
You're not relying on a second party to get your message out there for you.
Yeah.
Okay, that they're vested in the channel as the way it is. You
Hmm.
Nowadays, we get to use social media as a way to reach directly to the customer without relying on someone else to convey your message. You get to
Right.
do it yourself. And now um, it's even more so.
Hmm.
That's your primary message.
Right.
That you are the social media uh, interface.
Yeah. So are you consulting in social with people on social media too?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
um, at at this point, uh, our daughter is the social media
Okay.
person, but she's on YouTube and TikTok, and we have Facebook platforms. That was one thing that we've always done, is like something else, like our happiness course. Just
Uh-huh.
always looking at ways to get a message in front of someone. The happiness course is eventually built into the group that we have today, which is like getting, keeping people positive and giving, you know, good energy to people, and give them something to focus on that's not politics related, that's not
Right.
religion related. Based, just get a positive message out there. And that started in 2017, I think.
Okay.
We
Wow.
started that as a course on
Oh,
Udemy,
wow. Okay.
And then we wound
Oh,
up
who
like,
knew?
um, so we've been doing that, but now we are almost part-time models, I guess, for our daughter's uh,
I've seen
TikTok
you
platform.
modeling some of her tank tops. You're great.
It's different. People, it got the message out there. She's now at 500,000 followers, which is
Wow.
she put her she just this past Sunday put out um, 11 tops that she made. She usually
Uh-huh.
does a post once a month,
Okay.
and she sold out in less than 24 hours.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So looking at ways to use social media platform, and granted, it's a great platform, um, and I do like to entertain. So
And you're
I get
great. I love watching your videos
it's
and
so much
seeing you
fun.
model and everything that you're doing. And actually, when we finish, if you send me the links to all the things that you're doing, I'll put them
Okay.
in the description. And I'm also thinking, because you are so great at social media, how about I have you come back for another video and just talk about social media and what people should be doing?
Sure.
Because
Yes.
a lot of people wonder how they can incorporate social media into their job market. You know, what do they know and what can they do with that to go out and find jobs? And you'd be a great guy to be able to introduce that and, explain
Absolutely.
to somebody what they can do.
There's so much capability within social media to interface directly with the clients, and whether it's you're doing it for someone else or whether you're doing it for yourself,
Mhm.
um, you know that we're working to in an economy that's moving in a direction of direct interface,
Right,
and that's really important. What's my message? You know,
right.
so it's very important, even more so now today than it was in 2008.
Sure.
But
Oh, definitely. Definitely, especially
I
after the
love it.
pandemic. Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the pandemic changed a lot. So,
yeah, yeah. So if I look back on your whole life
mhm,
and you've made all of these different changes,
mhm,
which have kind of built on your last change. But
mhm.
a lot of it is through all those changes, you've met a lot of different people and made yourself known and been able to, if somebody looked at you, you've just fallen into these opportunities, which really you didn't fall into them. You know,
Right.
you
No, no.
networked well
Yes.
in
It's
order to fall into them.
it's a very it can be humbling sometimes, because you think that you're in the midst of something that's a failure,
Right,
but at the same time you go, here is an opportunity.
right.
You know, this
Yep,
is if can I do this, and just don't tell yourself no, I can't.
right.
Um, be be willing to say I don't know how to do this,
Hmm.
but I'm willing to try.
Most ideas are good ideas.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I
So,
think so too. That's great. You're wonderful. You would be such a good motivator. You might be a great handyman, but you are. I mean, you're an influencer and you're out there and you're doing it and successful at it. And how great is that?
yeah, it's super fun too. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to find the fun in it,
Yeah.
and it makes it. And even just now, um, today with last night, our daughter came over. She comes over twice a week, and we film twice a week. So it's
Uh-huh.
low commitment. You don't have to commit 100% of your time. You can partition
Yep.
out and find the thing that works for you. So
Yeah. And
I
you guys
really
have done crazy things, and when I start watching, I can't stop.
good, good. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the viewership.
Well, good. Well, thank you for talking to me today. We'll
Oh, you're welcome.
schedule another one soon.
Okay.
on social media, and you'll send me all the links on how people can find you.
Okay.
And hopefully, it'll be successful for both of us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
I
thanks a
look
lot,
forward to it.
Jeff,
All
and
right.
we'll talk
Thanks.
soon. Uh huh.
All right.